Hello, welcome to an update on the Russia-Ukraine war. It's January 21st, 2023, and just a few days ago, uh, it kind of looked like a new offensive. Some people are jokingly calling it the uber duper ultra mega super duper winter offensive because there's been so much hype about Russia starting something new. Defense Politics Asia has been joking about this. In his very dry sense of humor that I love. But yeah, so it's unclear still how super duper uber serious this is, but there have been some recent advances here in the on the Zaporozhia front, which I wanted to talk about today. And in general, what I wanted to talk about is what some realistic goals would be for Russia, in the next few months, kind of following up on my last video from about a week ago. And since it looks like Russia is interested in doing things on the Zaporozhia front, this had been a very quiet, almost frozen front since basically, last March, really. There's been very minimal activity from about Velika Novosilka all the way to Kamyanske. And in fact, there is a bridge, from what I understand, this kind of stream or Balka kind of forms the no man's land, and so you got the Russian side. In fact, this mapping I think is a little conservative. From what I understand, the Russians basically have up to here, Ukraine's up to here, and this bridge has kind of been the no man's land where they've done prisoner exchanges, and it's been the most uh, convenient place to do that, just because there's been hardly any fighting in this whole area, so both sides can kind of trust each other that if they see you know, vehicles from the opposing side showing up, it's probably not some sort of, invasion. So for that reason, they've been doing prisoner exchanges on this bridge, from what I understand. That may change now that this front is heating up again. There's not fighting, to be clear. There's not fighting yet around Kamianska itself, but there is some fighting just off to the east of that. So we'll see if this fighting envelops that, in which case I expect they would have to find a different spot to do prisoner exchanges if they continue to do them periodically. But yeah, long story short, this front has been extremely quiet for almost a year now, for about 10 months now. But all of a sudden, Russia seems to want to, push here, at least capturing a few villages on the front line. It's still unclear exactly what the intention of this is. If it's just to move, advance 6 or 7 kilometers as they've done, apparently, allegedly, and then stop. And I'm not sure why that would get them, a more advantageous position in and of itself. To me, sounds like they have intentions at least to take Orikhiv. Um, you know, Otherwise, why would they start things in the sector which have been quiet? And taking these few small villages doesn't really meaningfully isn't going to really meaningfully improve their position. If anything, I would think it would make them more vulnerable, just because they probably already have some sort of basic, trenches or fortifications built up on their previous line. And now, if they're advancing 6 or 7 kilometers, why go through that trouble just to have to build a whole new line? Unless in this region is not really very defensible. It's extremely flat farmland. There's some minor streams, or balkas as they call them, kind of these seasonally dry, seasonally wet, kind of very shallow streams, which really don't you know, constitute any sort of serious geographical barrier. So unless Russia has some plans backing this up, I don't really see why they would start advancing here all of a sudden, unless they're intending to go further. And to me, me and others, plenty of people on the Defense Politics Asia Discord have been kind of looking at this and kind of drawing some tentative lines of where would it make sense to, where would be another natural stopping point that might offer some sort of, terrain advantage for going back over onto the defense. And I think in this region, you notice there's this Konka River near Primorske. I think that would, make for a reasonable, kind of stopping point, or at least you get some sort of, terrain advantage. So let me show what that would kind of look like if Russia were interested in, advancing up to that line within the next couple of months. I think the next natural stopping point would be something like this. Along this, the river kind of comes down. I think they'd want to at least clear out a little bit around Orikhiv, not have Orikhiv right on the front lines, so they can use it kind of as a base for mobile defense. So you might take this little Balka up here, make this kind of your next stopping point. Ideally, kind of push out a little bit from this road, so you can use this for interior defense. And then coming up something like this. And then you probably ideally want to get Velika Novosilka as well and control over this road. And what this would do, if Russia could achieve something like this over the next several months, is it would not only give them just a little bit of natural terrain advantage to then go over onto the defense and guard against the anticipated spring counteroffensive, where Ukraine is allegedly going to try to drive south to Melitopol and the Black Sea, and cut off Crimea and Kherson province from the land connection. Obviously it would enlarge, it would create a larger buffer for that. But I think more importantly, Russia would get control over these lateral roads that it could use to conduct a better mobile defense and use Orikhiv as a base of mobile defense. Because right now Ukraine's kind of able to use Orikhiv as a base of mobile defense. And, let's say this town here is threatened, Hulia Pilski, just to pick one, for example. They can easily, Ukraine can easily, as it is right now, take forces out of Orikhiv, send them along this lateral road there, whereas Russia has to kind of attack across farmland without really any good roads. And I believe that's what they are doing right now. This road is probably kind of in the gray zone, not really able to really be used by either side right now. But Ukraine does have some nice lateral roads that it can use to conduct an active mobile defense and send its reserve, without having to go all the way back to the next node back and then come forward. Right now, Russia's kind of having to do that here. Like, I'm sure they have a force in Vasilivka and forces in Polohi. But let's say, there's a battle right here. Well, they either have to go across farmland, or let's say there's a battle right here and they want to reposition forces from Vasilivka. They can't use a lateral road to get over here. They got to go, from what I understand, probably all the way back to Tokmak and then back up if they want to use a main service route, a really well-maintained road. There are probably smaller roads they could use to make a more direct, shortcut, but just like driving on the highway versus, even just if you're driving a normal automobile, it's not always faster to, try to take these sort of shortcuts. And it may not even be possible at all for the types of vehicles that, they need to redeploy. Certain vehicles you just can't really, especially certain times of the year, drive on these, dirt roads. So if Russia could kind of push out and we'll zoom out a little bit and go back to showing what I think would be kind of a natural line of defense, the next logical place to stop, something like this. And then ideally taking Velika Novosilka and then come up here. This would also, surround and capture Ugledar or Vuhledar, like the Russians call it Ugledar, or it's spelled Ugledar. That's been a thorn in Russia's side for a long time. So, if Russia could push up something like this over the next few months, I think, that would be a realistic realistic, plan, and would definitely help them and put them, in a good position to defend against any sort of, Ukrainian counteroffensive in the spring once Ukraine gets its, armor um, and infantry fighting vehicles that it's supposed to be receiving. The new shipment that was just discussed, where they're getting several hundred pieces of either infantry fighting vehicles or tanks, and a lot more artillery ammunition and some other things. So it would be a good idea for Russia to get these lateral lines of defense, so they can either this one, or Russia can't really use this one either right now. It's kind of in the gray zone, but they could use that one. There's not really any good roads in this whole part of the sector, um, but it is what it is, I guess. If Russia really wanted to get some good, well-maintained roads behind its lines for lateral defense, they'd have to push all the way up to Pokrovsk, something like that. That would be way more ambitious, of course. I'm not sure Russia really has it in them quite yet to do that. They probably need another round of mobilization before they can bite off something that big. But I think this first line would even that would be a huge improvement in their position here on the Zaporozhian front. So let me go up to the Bakhmut front, and while we're at it, I might as well outline kind of what would be kind of the next natural stopping point up here. Probably something in between Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar, and then something that puts this highway in Seversk firmly under Russian control. That would be kind of the next logical point to stop and pause at. Although it kind of seems like Russia, like Wagner forces, are advancing surprisingly quickly to the west towards Konstantinivka. There's been talk of fighting even once again near Predtechny. I think I mentioned this last week, and even fighting near Alexandro Sholteny. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But I don't know if that's just reconnaissance forces or if they're going to make a serious push towards Konstantinivka. If you look at it, people talk about the Sloviansk, Kramatorsk urban agglomeration, but it's almost really a Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Drazivka, Konstantinivka urban agglomeration. This is what the Donbass is all about. These large kind of urban strips. This whole thing is kind of is going to be slow going whenever Russia starts biting into that. So I'm not sure. You'd probably want to consolidate everything else except for that before you really start biting into this entire urban agglomeration. Because if you look, it's pretty much all. I mean, you've got some neighborhoods that are those high rises that are extremely difficult to deal with, and even places that aren't high rises. You got factories, warehouses, the legacy of Soviet industrialization. It's pretty much almost unbroken belt of that all the way up through Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. So that's going to be difficult. So I think realistically over the next few months, Russia would be thrilled even if they only do something like this. If they take everything in here. And then that brings us back up to the Oskil kind of Svatove front, which once again, I'll just reiterate, I think a logical stopping point here would be to maybe try to retake Liman and make the Oskil River a new natural border. Maybe not in that order, I don't know. Last time I talked about, maybe trying to advance on Borova, and then coming down to Lozove, and then kind of a joint attack straight out of Dubrova, and then Lozove to converge on Krasny Liman. I still think that would give Russia a more logical line of defense, so they could then continue to focus on the Donbass proper down to the south. And then I still think, also on this sector of the Oskil River, at least pushing up to reclaim the rest of the Oskil River. Looking at the map, it could even make sense to try to push at least for some of the bank of the what is this? Is this the Servetsky Donetsk? I think it is. And then maybe a line kind of like this. They could take Kupiansk as a bridgehead, so maybe something like that, where they just have a bit of open ground as a frontier to guard. I feel like that would be an easier defensive assignment than what they have right now, and would be a bit of a morale boost to reclaim most of, not all of, but most of what they lost during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. So that's what, if I were Russia, that's kind of what I would focus on in the next few months. Those are some possible plans that I think are not too ambitious. It would still be tough going, not a cakewalk by any means. And looking ahead, once you have maybe a new line consolidated in Zaporozhia that looks something like this, and then you have the Bakhmut front consolidated like that. Then you have the Oskil River front consolidated like that, and then something like that. Then Russia would be in a decent position to then finally take on this Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, urban agglomeration, or they could continue whittling away at the flanks if they want to. They could let Wagner. I'm not sure exactly how they're supposed to pronounce their, but the Wagner PMC forces, they could let them continue bashing their head into this urban warfare, which they seem to be, disproportionately better at. Meanwhile, the Russians, the next logical thing to slice off would be to go again for Kharkiv. Which would mean something like Zolokiv, trying to go down through Zolokiv and kind of surround Kharkiv like that before they really take on the city center itself. It'd be, if Russia, there's a ring of highways, if they could take this outermost ring road that kind of goes through, I think, Zolokiv and, and then kind of besiege Kharkiv, kind of like they did Mariupol. That would kind of be a next logical step. Looking way down the line, since Russia has committed to quote-unquote liberating Zaporozhia province, since Russia considers that Russian territory at this point, they will need to take this eventually. As far as geography, the next naturally geographical stopping point would be, I believe it's the Samara River, something like this. And then you could come up and kind of roughly connect that, with if Russia makes gains in Kharkiv. And then looking way down the road, maybe this river comes up through, actually, I think it goes just to the east of Poltava. It kind of comes up through Turka. That would be kind of a logical stopping point. Apologize for my dog. Beyond that, I don't know if it would make much sense to push any further, even into the end game, just because people talk about Ukraine becoming Banderistan if you get farther to the northwest here, where population really does not like Russia in this region. But then again, if you have several more years of plotting brutal warfare, it's probably going to end up driving a lot of the civilian population out of these regions anyways as refugees, either as internal refugees or refugees going to foreign countries. And who knows if many of those will ever want to come back anyways. So Russia might end up, resettling some of these lands with, pro-Russian, loyalists, which kind of sounds like ethnic cleansing, but that may end up happening. In which case, Russia could make a play for even something like this that takes everything east of the Dnieper, and maybe even takes, Kiev, since that would be a prestige, tied with, Russian nationalism as the birthplace of the of Rus, which the Russians consider themselves to be a part of. Especially if they want to create some sort of future union state that, tries to make a play for the allegiances of Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. That would kind of be an important constituent of that. But really, I could never see Russia even wanting to push farther west than that, even if they had the capability, or at the very least permanently annexing any farther west than that. I don't really see. Maybe they'd want control over this Chernobyl region just because they seem to, early in the war, not really trust Ukraine to not be doing funny business with the radiological material there. I don't know if the Russian government still feels that way, if they'd be interested in taking over this kind of uninhabited region up here as well. But that's looking way ahead in the future. We're nowhere near there yet. And also at some point, if Russia ends up decisively starting to make progress, they'd probably want to revisit, Odessa, what to do about that, which I don't know if that would mean trying to get across the Dnieper again, or, way long down the road, something more amphibious where they try to carve out something like this, so they can also get a tenuous connection to Transnistria and the city of Odessa itself, which also has there's a lot of historical attachment to that among a lot of Russians, for various reasons I won't go into. Would this be a logical kind of exclave to carve out? Yes, you could supply it over ocean. You could leave Ukraine with this, where technically Ukraine would still then have access to the sea through Mykolaiv as their main port, but it would be very bottled up, very much under Russian supervision. If Russia could then take Odessa, that's looking way long into the war, but those would be kind of possible logical objectives much later into the war. But I think I've outlined, at least in the next few months, kind of what some of these short-term, reasonable goals would be for Russia. We'll see if they take my advice, or if they start something totally unexpected, like this mythical or hypothesized advance into towards Kiev. We'll still, from Belarus. We'll see in the months ahead if something like that pans out instead. So anyways, hope you found this informative. Bye bye for now.